Welcome once again. We do apologize for the cut in transmission. We thank you for your patience. We have been having some technical difficulties related to power at the National Emergency Management Agency. We will resume our briefing now by inviting again Mr. Timothy Antoine, who is the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, to make his presentation on financial prudence in light of the economic trajectory. Mr. Antoine.
Thank you very much, Director General. I wish to commence by thanking Mr. Abdia Samuel, Chairman of the National Task Force on COVID-19, for his invitation to share a perspective this afternoon. Coffee reminds us in her song that gratitude is a must. And therefore, as governor of our central bank and as a resident in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, I would like to express my profound gratitude on behalf of our entire ECCB family to the entire task force for the great work it has done in this period. I also wish to, of course, recognize not just Mr. Samuel, the chairman, but all our healthcare professionals, as I prefer to call them, our frontline warriors. The Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, the Chief Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, the Director General of the SKNIS, Mr. Leroy Williams, Commissioner Brandy, and I recognize Superintendent Henry this afternoon, and all members of the St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force, Commandant Comrie and members of the Defense Force, and all essential workers. There is no doubt in my mind that your work has been selfless and stellar. And because of your work and efforts, you have saved lives. This afternoon, I wish to be brief. I will touch on the economic impact of the pandemic on the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, and then I'll share a few thoughts about how we may proceed before I conclude. Now to the impact. As you are all well aware, the global economy is now in recession. And in the ECCU, we project a sharp contraction in 2020. In fact, our latest numbers indicate that that contraction may be somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 20%. And that's, of course, an average across the currency union. And clearly, one of the biggest drivers of that is the tourism sector, which, as you know, is now shut. It's our lead sector: foreign exchange, jobs, government revenue. Our tourism sector has gone to a halt. And at this moment, the biggest question is, when will tourism rebound? Truth be told, we do not really know. Of course, we hope it will be sooner rather than later, but in all likelihood, the economic damage of this pandemic will outlast the pandemic. And in the absence of a vaccine, we're likely to have a protracted recovery process, so that 12 to 18 months does not appear, in my estimation, to be unreasonable at this stage, but we are still assessing as we go. In terms of employment, we have seen a sharp rise in unemployment across the currency union. And in fact, in at least two countries, I am now advised that unemployment is approaching 50%. That is 50%. I do not have numbers for St. Kitts and Nevis, but what we do know, and we heard a little earlier, is that more than 2,000 persons have applied for relief under the Social Security Board's COVID Relief Fund. In respect of government revenues, my information at this moment is that governments across the currency union are seeing revenues plummet by as much as 50%. In some cases, it's actually more. In one country, it's close to 75%. I do not yet have the numbers for St. Kitts and Nevis, but we do know that St. Kitts and Nevis has some buffers, more buffers than most, and so perhaps the impact is not being felt yet because of the buffers available to the state and to the people. But clearly, revenues are down, and that's obvious. Hotels are closed, jobs have been lost, businesses have been shut. In terms of remittances, remittances have been very resilient over time in our region, and they're a very important part of our economy and our coping mechanism. Because of the massive layoffs in the US in particular, where there are now, I'm told, close to 30 million people unemployed, there will be an adverse impact on remittances in our currency union. In fact, we may see a phenomenon we observed after the global financial crisis when we saw reverse remittances. That is to say, people in our currency union were sending money to people in the United States and the UK. That is a distinct possibility at this time. In terms of foreign direct investment, there will be a decline, at least in the short term. And that may also include the citizenship by investment programs, because some of the prospective applicants have been affected by the financial markets, which of course are in turmoil, and by various developments across the world. Having said that, I have heard from one or two countries that they are continuing to feel interest in the program. And so my hope is that that damper will be short-lived, given the importance of these programs to our region, and of course here in St. Kitts and Nevis, which has the oldest and largest program. One legacy benefit of the pandemic, I hope, will be stronger health systems, because our governments have had to invest significant sums in our health systems. And therefore, a legacy benefit would be a stronger system which then enhances the value proposition for our countries in respect of citizenship by investment. Because going forward, people need to know that they will be safe, that their health will be looked after. So that is potentially some good news. And another piece of good news is the fact that oil prices currently are very low. In fact, those of us who fill up at the pump will see the obvious benefit because we're paying less to fill up our tanks. The other good news about low oil prices is that we are paying less to import oil. And of course, as oil importing countries, we spend significant sums every year on oil imports. And so that is a good piece of news in a very bleak economic picture, because as the saying goes, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. And speaking of foreign reserves, I now wish to advise that the EC dollar remains very strong. As of last Friday, April 24th, our dollar was backed by foreign reserves 100.3%. I repeat, 100.3%. And as I said on a previous occasion, our strong buffers will serve our currency union very well in this difficult season. So having given you a quick overview of the economic impact on our currency union, I now want to pivot to talk very briefly about some of what the ECCB is doing. And because we have announced and published some of our actions, I will not go into any detail. except to mention a few. The first is that the ECCB, in March, disbursed a grant of $4 million to our member countries. St. Kitts and Nevis received $500,000 from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to help ostensibly with the procurement of testing equipment and critical supplies. We have supported loan deferral programs by our banks. And many of you are now taking advantage of that. Those programs are intended to give deferrals up to 6 months. The central bank has also cut the borrowing rate for governments and banks from 6.5% to 2%. So when the governments come to borrow from the central bank, or the banks come to borrow, they will be paying a lot less than they did before. And very importantly, the ECCB has deployed its full teleworking or telecommuting mode. And this is very important because since late March, the central bank has been working from home, and we continue to operate at a very high level, delivering all of our services, including clearing payments for our banks, which we do on a daily basis, issuing currency to the countries as they need to ensure the ATMs are stocked and restocked, advising our governments, overseeing our banks, and I can go on and on. All of that work continues behind the scenes. And I really, at this moment, would like to express my great pride and thanks to the hard-working staff of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. The truth is, ECCB staff work hard all the time. In normal times, we put in the hours. But in this unprecedented period, the new normal, as it were, many of us are working even harder at home than we did before. So I want to thank all of my staff, management and staff, for their hard work. And I want to recognize Ms. Shumberland Kirby, who is supporting me today, and of course Mr. Marlon Bristol as well on the technical side. And by the way, to thank our New York technical professionals. I know we've had a rough day today, but I recognize you've been at it for every day for the last how many weeks, and so I want to thank you for your support as well. Now let me pivot before I conclude to some action points. Ladies and gentlemen, the primary focus of the COVID-19 response has been on saving lives. And that is the right and appropriate thing to do. However, even as that important work continues, we must now give increasing focus to saving livelihoods and saving our economies. Allow me then to propose a few action points that might assist us in that regard. The first one should come as no surprise, but it's the first action point, key action point. Follow the health protocols. Follow the health protocols. You see, as we move to reopen the economy, what we are in fact doing is learning to live with COVID-19. Because there is no vaccine for the virus. So we are learning to live with it. It therefore means that all of the protocols that we have been following, we must continue to follow. Our health requires that we do, and our economies demand that we do. And if we don't, if we get careless and complacent, we are going to be forced back into lockdowns, back into shutdowns, and will impose and bring upon ourselves, heap upon ourselves, more economic difficulty. So that's the key action point number one. This is not a time to let down your guard. In fact, in one country, not in St. Kitts and Nevis, but in our currency union, this week, there were 4 cases around a workplace cluster. They got back into the workplace, clearly were not fully following the protocols. And one thing led to another, and there are now 5 people, essentially, 4 plus 1, who are now COVID-19 COVID-19 positive. So we cannot afford to let down our guard. And let me say this. I heard Mr. Samuel yesterday saying that from next week, they will be forced to shut businesses. I want to see businesses stay open. But if you're not going to follow the protocol, if you're not going to follow the protocols, you have to be shut. So I want to encourage everyone to follow the protocols that have been established. And I want to commend the task force for not simply asking, but sending out a compliance regime to check, to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Ultimately, those are things which will help to save the livelihoods and save our economies. So that's very important. The second thing is expand connectivity. Expand connectivity. It is pellucidly clear that connectivity and digital tools have been a lifeline in this pandemic. If you think about it, you could not be hearing me and I could not be hearing from you without the digital tools this afternoon. And we've heard the briefings throughout. Schools, work, payments, all of these things have been facilitated by digital tools. In this regard, I want to commend our telecommunications providers and SCELEC, and of course all providers and utilities across the currency union. And going forward, it is going to be imperative that we stay connected and connect the unconnected. And this is very important because what we have observed in this period is that the persons and households that have access to digital tools have fared better. And those who don't have fared not so well, which is why our governments are now working to procure and deliver tools for students, for example, to continue their education. There are some businesses that have not been able to telework because they do not have the apparatus so to do. But going forward, this is going to be very important. So the second key action point is connectivity, expand connectivity. The third action point is to adopt a growth mindset. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I haven't heard him speak about money management yet. I'm going to say a few things on that shortly. But the truth is, we cannot go to the economics before we address the ethos. The reality is that our world has changed. Some call it a new normal. Some call it a new regular. Some call it a new usual. Whatever your choice of words or expression, our world has changed. And to cope, we need a growth mindset. One of the most important qualities of a growth mindset is that it learns from problems and reframes problems into opportunities. A growth mindset reframes problems into opportunities. The reality is that this adversity presents opportunities. And so, I'm heartened by the early evidence of some businesses that have basically revamped or tweaked their business models to include delivery of certain services, and I think that's important. And I will make the point again, going forward, health and safety will be key to all and any business, large or small. Health and safety. Hotels, small business, bars, shops, supermarkets, any business, and of course workplaces as well. So ask yourself, what has this pandemic taught me? And how can I be more resilient in the future? Write down your lessons and begin to craft a recovery plan. And now I'll say a few words on finances. So the fourth action point is manage your finances wisely. At this moment, we do not know how long this pandemic will last, so we must be prudent. Our working assumption is that this is a marathon, not a sprint. To manage our finances, we must do the following, and I'm just going to highlight a few things because we will be doing more of this in the next few weeks through our podcast, ECCB Connects. Identify essential and non-essential spending. So just as we have essential and less essential workers, we have essential and non-essential spending. That's another way of saying focus on your needs, not your wants. And perhaps the experience of the past month might assist us in clarifying in our minds what is essential and what is not. Because we're going to have to make the decision because we are working with less. We have less income. We have less resources. So consider the example, for example, consider this simple example. I have $900 saved. If this pandemic is going to last 3 months, I can spend $300 per month. That will tide me to the end of 3 months. However, if this pandemic lasts 9 months, then I must spend $100 per month because I need that $900 to tide me over not 3 months, but 9 months. My point is that we need to use our limited finances wisely. All of us. At the personal level, at the household level, at the business level, and at the government level. All of us. Because money is scarce. Avail yourself of financial relief. So for example, the banks and credit unions are offering loan deferral, a moratorium. The utility companies, Social Security, the government. You need that support? Avail yourself at this point. That will also help. Our churches, others, avail yourself. But I also want to challenge us to save something from what little we receive. If you are receiving $500 per month, try and save $50. It might seem like a big ask because you think you want to do a lot of things, but I hope the last month has taught us that not everything is essential. And perhaps we could live on a lot less if we understand the situation and we embrace the times. If you're earning or you're collecting $1,000, try and save $100. I know some of you are saying, I don't know how that is possible, but I want to remind you, our parents and grandparents worked for a lot less than we did and saved a lot more. And perhaps we need to draw on those lessons. I always say they were some of the best economists I know. And I think at this moment, that wisdom would help. So I'm going to leave finances for now. There'll be more in the next few weeks on that. I'm almost done. The next action point is to feed your faith, not your fears. This afternoon, this evening, I know many people are anxious and fearful about their future. That is a real fear. That is a real fear. The situation is challenging. Now, fear has a useful function. It alerts us to danger, real and potential. But once we have been alerted, we have to pivot from fear to faith. Because if we don't, we are going to be paralyzed by fear. We are going to be paralyzed by fear, and we must not give in to fear. So, 3 weeks ago, I declared that social distancing does not mean spiritual distancing. And I exhorted everyone to spiritual closeness. And now I make that appeal again. And I'm saying to us, how do we feed our faith? Well, we feed our minds on God's word. So, that's excellent food for the mind. One of my favorite vitamins is found in John 16:33, which says, and I quote, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. End of quote. This is one of my favorites. I reflect on that a lot in this period. That's how I feed my faith. And when you do that, it is not that your faith disappears, but your faith grows. And it empowers you to cope better than you otherwise would. What's the contrast? The alternative is to sit in front of television and consume that, stay on social media and consume that. Chances are you're going to get more fearful and more anxious, and that is going to affect your ability to respond. Penultimate action point, count your blessings. I know in this period it is easy to get discouraged and even depressed. But every day, count 3 blessings. 3 blessings. Remember what Kofi said, gratitude is a must. Count 3 blessings. It will help your state of mind. And the final action point is support regional solidarity. We have to look no further than our central bank to understand and appreciate what regional solidarity can do. Lest we forget, our countries were not expected to survive after independence. You go and read those reports. We were not expected to survive. But we did not just survive, we thrived. And notwithstanding the ups and downs over time, our countries have been resilient because we've stuck together and we've worked together. And so I make the appeal again in this difficult season for us to stick together and stand firm in solidarity with each other, so that as we speak, our health professionals and others are looking at the protocols that are required to reopen our borders and to be able to have airlines come back into our shores, to our countries. And we're doing it together. We're looking at it regionally. That is an example of the kind of working together that needs to be done now. And make no mistake, because many of our large countries are so preoccupied with their own issues, they do not have too much time for small states like ours. So we have to take care of our own business, and part of that, an important part of that, is standing together, sticking together, and standing together in this moment of adversity. So regional solidarity is crucial. And so I conclude, finally, with a poignant quote from Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States of America. It says, and I quote, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew." End of quote. That's the growth mindset I'm talking about. Citizens and residents of the Currency Union, let's stay together. And God helping, we shall overcome. Thank you.
We thank the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Timothy Antoine, for that comprehensive presentation, not just about finances,